And so if you can just put your hands on those people who are raising all the hell in the community and take them out of circulation, the crime rate drops.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
The Vision of the Anointed. Now that's an interesting title. Who are the anointed?
They're the elite in the media, in politics, all of those who think that third parties ought to be making people's decisions for them. The subtitle is Self-Congratulation as a Basis for Social Policy. In other words, people who think that everything that's wrong with the country is due to the fact that other people are just not as smart as they are. And if only they could, you know.
I don't know much about Thomas Sowell, or is it Sowell? I don't know. But one thing I do respect about him is that he's truly a scholar. And you don't have to be a scholar to get respect, obviously. But what I mean by that is that everything that he discusses, it seems like he put a lot of research into. And he's not very one-sided on anything. He's more so centralized on just what's right and what's wrong. And that's one thing that you don't get a lot of when it comes to public figures.
Or people like them could take over and make our decisions, we'd be so much better off.
But in early America, didn't this sort of educated class make the decisions for everybody?
As far as governmental decisions,
Yeah.
but the government itself didn't make the decisions for everyone. Now, you know, you can't decide where your kid's going to school. You can't decide whether or not they can move a halfway house for drug users next door to you or whatnot.
It's out of your control. The government decides
That's
that
right.
stuff.
The government decides too many things. They decide also how your children will be raised. You may have an idea about at what age children should be introduced to sex, and in what manner, with what kind of moral commitments.
You mean as a parent, you have this...
As a parent, yes. The schools have taken that over. By the time you even think about it, they've already had years, you know, of showing...
They're passing out condoms to these kids.
Passing out
even before
condoms is not even the half of it. They're showing motion pictures of naked couples engaging in sex, both homosexual and heterosexual, in the 7th grade.
What?
And if you complain...
Wow. I'm not going to lie. The first time school introduced that topic to my specific generation was like around literal 7th grade. He has a point. Like, I never thought about it, but the schooling system has a lot of control over when you learn certain things and when you don't learn certain things. And I've never thought about it like that because I'm still in school. So it's like you don't even think about it like that. You just kind of accept what you're learning.
Both homosexual and heterosexual in the 7th grade. And if you complain about it, that's considered to be censorship.
You can't pull your kid out of school and say they don't have to put up with this stuff? I guess you could,
No.
but you'd be...
Well, if you have a private school to put him in, but you have compulsory attendance laws, and if you don't have the money for private schools, then you're stuck.
Where did this country get off the track and decide that the federal government should make most of our decisions?
Well, it started to some extent in the New Deal, but I think the 1960s is sort of the golden age, if you want to put it that way, of this whole mindset. And that's what the book's about. It's about a mindset. It's not about a series of policies, but of showing how in policy after policy, those who think a certain way will try to take over other people's decisions.
How do you characterize...
So I have a question from obviously a student's perspective. What would be the alternative to the government deciding how kids are in school? Like, would it be like a town vote, or would each individual set of parents or parent decide specifically what their child is going to learn? What if a parent doesn't know what their child should learn? What if a parent doesn't, like, what, and I'm just a serious question, what is the alternative to the government deciding?
Those who think a certain way will try to take over other people's decisions.
How do you characterize the liberal philosophy today from the conservative philosophy?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess the main thing about the liberals, again, is that they think a program will do it. If there's something that they don't like in the society, you have to set up a program and that will solve the problem. I think one of the words they use a lot is solutions. And I argue here and elsewhere that there are no solutions. There are just trade-offs. So, for example, when Ralph Nader launched his attack against the Corvair many years ago, he said it's an unsafe car and it has these safety problems and those safety problems. And in some respects, he was correct, not all. But the fact is, there were other things that a Corvair would do that made it safer than other cars. And on net balance, it was as safe as the rest of them.
Are you saying there are no solutions to our problems as Americans?
There are no solutions to anybody's problems. There are trade-offs. You know, safety is a classic example. Every year, so many hundred.
He has a point, because I'm assuming right now he's speaking about how liberalism is speaking about the effects of liberalism on the schooling system, and he's basically saying how there are no solutions. Really, it's just something is getting traded off in what you're trying to fix. And because I just left school, like I'm still in college right now, I don't know how to argue against that. I really, I don't know. I need to hear more about what he has to say. That's an interesting take.
Hundreds of thousands of people are vaccinated against measles, smallpox, those kinds of things. Now, this saves several hundred lives, it's estimated. It also causes brain damage to about 30 kids a year. Now, there are no solutions in that. There are just trade-offs.
What about crime? Take crime as an issue. Can we solve the crime issue, or fundamentally solve it so it's reduced?
Well, then that's a trade-off. You don't solve it. There will always be crime. There always has been. But you want to keep it down to some level. It's not this astronomical thing we have today. For example, the liberals right now are saying, crime has eased off in New York, and that's true. There were 6 times as much crime in New York a few years ago as there was in 1960. Now it's down to 5 times as much crime as there was in 1960. Now that's not what I regard as a great trend, unless it continues a lot more strongly.
The liberals think we need more education, and we need to help people in the inner city more to cut down crime there. Conservatives would say we have to be tougher on crime. Is either of them correct?
Oh, I no. You see, the conservative view is really not a solution. It's a trade-off. It says, yes, it would be wonderful if we could do all these things to prevent crime in the first place. We just don't happen to be that smart. And so what we do, we put people behind bars who commit violent crimes. Now, a few years ago in East Palo Alto, which is not far from Stanford University, a minority community, low income, they had the doubtful distinction of being the murder capital of the United States in proportion to their population. The next year, murder and all sorts of other violent crimes dropped tremendous amount, 30, 40, 50% in 1 year. Now, that wasn't because they discovered the root causes of crime or because they worked out everything that was wonderful. They launched a campaign that put a lot of the bad guys behind bars. And when they were behind bars, they didn't commit as many crimes.
Makes sense to me.
And the thing that it's marvelous, even in a high crime area, the great majority of the people are not criminals. And so if you can just put your hands on those people who are raising all the hell in the community and take them out of circulation, the crime rate drops.
That makes a lot of sense. That actually makes a lot of sense. And it's crazy how this thought, it seems so like obviously just take the people out who's committing the crimes. Like obviously, it seems how it's crazy how that's like a controversial take on crime. Like, yeah, just remove the people who are committing the crimes. Well, but they're still good people, we can never. No, just take them out. Just take them out of the neighborhoods. But I will say this. I do understand why somebody wouldn't. Nah, I don't get it. You should still take the people out who's committing the crimes. But I do think some places have systematic issues where I would understand if someone said, no, this issue is systematic. We have to change the landscape of the area. However, the quickest solution to these issues is to just take the people out who's committing the crimes. That's like the quickest. Crime is going to drop dramatically. I don't know enough about crime or any of this to say, will it stay like that? I don't know, but it makes sense to me, bro.
People say there's undue emphasis on African Americans for committing crimes. Is that true? Ed Koch wrote in a column here that the population is 25% African American in New York. 62% of the crimes are committed by African Americans. Is that and he says
I haven't checked these figures, but throughout the world, this is not unusual. Throughout the world, people are disproportionately represented in all kinds of different things. And it's true, obviously, in basketball. It's true in all kinds of other things. The main thing is not to keep people out of jail because they're one race or another, because when you do that, the people who are going to suffer the most will be the black community.
Where are you on affirmative action?
Against.
Why?
Well, you can only do one of two things. You can either just judge people individually, or you can judge them by groups. This whole notion that you're going to come out with a compromise, I would defy anybody to come out with a compromise on that. You're going to do one of those two things. Now, you can pretend to be doing other things, but that's all you're going to do. Those are the only two choices you really have in the end. Again, the people who are the anointed think of this as a symbolic issue, and they want to be on the side of the angels. They don't ask, what are the consequences? Now, I've studied affirmative action programs around the world. One of the consequences is that those people who are more fortunate in the group that has the preferences, those people take the lion's share of the preferences. Very often, those at the other end of the scale, poorer people, actually fall further behind. That's true of blacks here. It's true of Malays in Malaysia. It's true of various groups in India. And there are reasons for that. You can say you must have certain proportion. Nothing is easier than for an employer who might otherwise locate, let's say, in the Bronx, to locate out in Provo, Utah, where he will be not near any black people, and therefore he will never have lawsuits, and the jobs will be in Provo, and people will wonder, why don't people, here have more jobs?
So I think I don't really understand affirmative action on that level. I am in college, but this is not my area of study. So I think he's saying affirmative action would cause more issues on companies who want to discriminate against lower class or minorities. I think that's what he's saying. I don't know for sure. If I'm wrong, somebody please let me know in the comments. But I see where he's coming from. Like, I see why he would think that.
He will be not near any black people, and therefore he will never have lawsuits, and the jobs will be in Provo, and people will wonder, why don't people, here have more jobs? It never seems to occur to liberals that other people are not blocks of wood, that when you set up certain incentives, they will react to them in certain ways. And when they do that, the result may be the opposite of what you set out to do.
How do the anointed refer to people they don't agree with?
All sorts of ways, but I think the main thing is they believe that you're not merely in error, but in sin. In other words, they can't believe that you're just mistaken. You must have sold out. You must be something warped about you.
You guys are for the rich. You guys only care about the rich guys. Answer that. How do you respond? Liberal says conservatives only care about rich people.
Well, one of the things I go into in the book is that the whole notion of rich is ridiculous. That most Americans don't stay in the same income bracket, even for 1 decade. So the same guy who is, quote, rich now was 20 years ago, probably.
That's a good point, man. That's a great point, even, because people speak as economic status as if it's set in stone, but you can literally change your economic status. You can become rich. You could be not poor, but you could be low income in 2019, but you could be high income in 2023. So I do understand when they say, when he says like he has an issues or quarrels with saying conservatives only care about the rich. But let's be honest. That statement itself doesn't make any sense because it implies that liberals aren't rich or there's not rich liberals when that's not true. A lot of people in hip hop or in a lot of the mainstream cultures are liberals, or at least they present as liberal. And so a lot of conservatives are rich. So it just depends. Like, you can be rich as a liberal or conservative, and your economic class can change. So what do you mean you only care about the rich? There are poor conservatives and there are poor liberals, and there are rich conservatives and there are rich liberals. So yeah.
So the same guy who is, quote, rich now was 20 years ago probably in the bottom 20%. I was on a cruise recently, a luxury cruise, and the guy said, if someone had told me when I was growing up that I would end up on a cruise like this, I would have said, get real, man. That very few people are in that same income bracket the whole time.
Right.
The genuinely rich and the genuinely poor, I would estimate to be no more than 3% of the American people.
Really?
Put together.
Really?
Yes.
Genuinely poor. Now, I'm seeing numbers like, when they were talking about health care, they said, 30 million people couldn't afford it or something? That's a big number.
Several million of those were making more than $50,000 a year. So it's not, see, this is one of the things the Anointed do. They never believe that people make choices. There are people who have the money they prefer.
And this is the biggest problem that makes me stay away from politics and stuff like this. Because I am in college, but I stay away from it. I stayed away from it for as long as possible. Like, I didn't pick a side. I still haven't picked a side. I just stayed away from it. I'm very ignorant about it. However, because I'm an engineer student, I know how easy it is to play with statistics. I know how easy it is to play with numbers. I know if you have if you have a thought or you have a message you want to get across and you want to use statistics, you can manipulate. You can manipulate any message you want to get across with statistics, any single one. And I know for a fact this is done. This is done via social media platforms and politics. I know for a fact it is, because if you have an agenda you want to push, you need to have some numbers in it. And nobody's going to look into every single set of numbers they have, or at least the majority of people aren't. And that's all you need. It doesn't matter if 10% of people look into what you're saying. 90% of people won't look into what you're saying. And you don't need 100% of people to support you. You only need the majority of people to support you. So I know exactly what he's referring to.
To put that money into a BMW rather than
A lot of young people didn't want health care. They were betting on their health.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
then this allows them to buy more stuff they want to buy. So it's not a question that they couldn't afford it. It's a question they don't choose to spend the money.
What about mean-spirited? Conservatives are mean-spirited. They're bigots. They don't like people.
Well, one of the things I tell people say, you're a very tough person. I'm not tough. Life is tough. I'm merely trying to acquaint you with those facts.
Back in the 60s, Lyndon Johnson announced a war.
I'd actually argue that it's the opposite. I don't think conservatives are mean people. And the reason I say this, and I'm not conservative and I'm not liberal. However, on social media and online, I would say a liberal leaning party is a little more dismissive than a conservative party. And I may be wrong here. I'm just going off of what I see. I'm not using no statistics. I'm just using what I see online, which also could be a little misleading, but I digress. I say a liberal party, they will literally try to cancel you. That's how cancel culture was literally created. It's when they literally stop you from speaking. That's cancel culture. And that's a left-leaning idea. That's a left-leaning idea, canceling people. That wasn't started by the conservative party. That was more so a left-leaning idea, like, oh, you're canceled. What does this mean? Means you're dismissing them completely. They can't speak no more. They cannot be online in your presence. That's way more cruel, in my opinion, than just disagreeing with somebody like, no, you're wrong. And you having a back and forth and be like, no, maybe you're right, or maybe no. If you're canceling someone, you're destroying their livelihood. That's a left-leaning idea. And you can't lie. It is. So I'm just being as objective as I can be.
War on poverty. Am I wrong? But there are more poor people. I mean, in other words,
Today than there were then, yes.
Yeah, there are more poor people.
Yes.
I mean, this was a hell of a war. We lost it, apparently, because for the last 30 years, we've been dumping money into these poverty programs.
Oh, absolutely.
Where's the money go?
Oh, it supports a whole industry of people who run those programs, who talk about those programs, research those programs, bureaucrats, and so on.
Doesn't help poor people.
No. The tragedy, you see, is that the Anointed really want to make symbolic statements. And running these programs makes those symbolic statements. They don't really care if in the wake of affirmative action, for example, companies start locating away from minority communities so they don't even get involved in legal action. They don't care about that. They've made their statement on the side of the angels, and that's what's important.
And one thing about and affirmative action is multifaceted, so I'm not going to say whether I agree or disagree with it. That's up for you to discuss. But I will say this, based off of what his point is, because I stay on topic. I do see why companies would do that, and I see why companies would build a resentment towards affirmative action and minority groups of people. Because let me put myself in their shoes. If I was a CEO of a company, what's your main goal? The main goal is always to make money. Like, don't get it wrong. You also are to help people and to make the world a better place. But for majority of corporations, your main objective is to make money, because you need money to survive. And of course, it's your mission, your company's mission, that's second to making money, because you wouldn't be doing your company's mission if you were not making money. Because then you would just be like the Salvation Army or something, where you're just volunteering everything. But anyways, if affirmative action says, oh, you have to hire this specific amount of black people, then your thing is, but what, like, you just would probably naturally think, like, what if there are better candidates? Like, that's just a natural human thought. It's not about race or nothing. It's just naturally, like, this is what I would naturally think. I wouldn't say it's a wrong or right thing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I would naturally think that, and you're always going to be thinking that in the back of your head. Whereas if this didn't exist, you would probably never think that. You'd just be thinking, oh, he's the best candidate or she's the best candidate. That would be it in your mind. But affirmative action makes you believe that, oh, maybe they aren't the best candidate. Then I'm just speaking from like what I would personally think as a human, because we're all humans, and you just naturally would think like, oh, what if I could have got someone better? What if you would just be questioning your thought, and it would ironically make it harder for the person you hired. So yeah.
Have you ever debated Jesse Jackson?
No, I haven't.
Is that because, would you like to, or would he not want to do that?
I have no idea.
You'd be willing to, I assume.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
You think that's too much showbiz?
It is. There are people who go and do this, and I'm doing less and less of it. And I tell them the story of an African boxing champion who fought an Irishman in St. Patrick's Day in Dublin. And he lost his title on what the sports writers called a questionable decision.
Yes.
And so you have to know what forum you're talking about.
Right.
I saw Shelby Steele on with him, and I said, if Jesse Jackson and Shelby Steele each had to present a 2-hour lecture to an audience with an average IQ of 120, Shelby would wipe him out. But if they had 5 seconds each on Donahue, it would be Jesse Jackson all the way.
Right.
So everything depends upon the forum.
Is Jesse Jackson good for African Americans or
No.
not?
He's
not.
good for himself.
Good for himself.
And that's true of most ethnic leaders in most groups, in most countries, in most periods of history.
And that's actually one thing. I don't know Jesse Jackson. I will say this, though, because Jesse Jackson is obviously before my time. Actually, I'm going to say it. I think focusing specifically, if you're a leader, focusing majority of the time on issues automatically wouldn't make you a good leader. Think about it like this: you're the head of your family, whether you're the mom or the father, and you have children or you have little cousins. If you told your little children and your little cousins or the people you're taking care of, or maybe you're taking care of your parents, and you're the leader of your family, and you focus majority of the time telling them every single issue wrong with the world, would that make you a good leader? No, in any case, it would not make you a good leader. Whether you're in a relationship, whether you have a family, if you are the leader of your family and you're focused and you're telling them everything wrong with the world, everything wrong with your finances, everything wrong with work, everything wrong with life, they would still probably follow you, but you wouldn't be the most optimal leader, in comparison to where you're positive all the time. Instead of telling them about every single issue, you face every issue head on and you try to fix it. That's a better leader. That's the leader I would want. That's the leader I want to be. I don't want to tell you everything wrong with life and be like, yeah, life sucks. Like, yeah, you shouldn't be doing. Like, you would just be depressed and give up on the world if that was your leader. You need a leader that motivates you, that wants everything to be better, and that's just my opinion.
That what will serve his interest is to keep people paranoid, dependent upon him, dependent upon government. What will serve their interest is typically just the opposite.
That's pretty interesting. So you're saying that the leaders, whatever group, leader, wants the people to be poor and dependent on them as opposed to dependent on themselves.
Oh, absolutely. And you see this in the greatest cynicism in the academic world, where in many places, black organizations on campus have a say on who gets admitted. And they have turned down blacks with excellent credentials, both as students and as faculty members, for that very reason.
Who are the mascots of the Anointed? You talk about the mascots of the Anointed.
They're people whom they choose to back and whose rights are supposed to override other people's rights. The homeless are a classic example. I'm appalled when I see people out there in the street giving money to the home. I mean, able-bodied men. I think one of the classic pictures to me was in San Francisco, when there was this able-bodied white man out in the street begging, and there's this black lady coming along there, very modestly dressed, like she didn't have, but she's stopping to open her purse to give him some money, And I thought, good heavens, have we really come to this? And we've been brainwashed by the Anointed into thinking this is what we ought to do.
What do you say to guys who bum money off of you?
Not all of it can be repeated on the air, but the fact is they don't get any money.
They don't.
And people who complain now about all these people begging in the street, there's a simple answer. Don't give them money, and they won't be in the street.
When you wrote this, What were you trying to accomplish with the book, and did you do it? Were you nailing liberals for 30 years of social policy? What were you trying to say?
I was trying to reveal the thinking behind that, the kinds of assumptions, the kind of world that exists inside their mind, and therefore why those assumptions are so dangerous in the long run. It's not just the policies mentioned in that
They
book.
think they're better than everybody else.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. And that's what makes them dangerous. Even all the policies that are mentioned there, 20 years from now, those policies may not be the policies we're concerned about. But that mindset will still be there. And what makes them tremendously dangerous is that facts that contradict what they believe are simply ignored or evaded.
That's one area that I agree on. And I'm not conservative. I'm not liberal. I'm not anything now. I don't know anything about politics at this age, at this stage of my life. Eventually, I'll make a decision, but at this stage, I'm nothing because I don't know nothing about it. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like I'm just being transparent. But that's the truth. Like it's just dismissed. I said this earlier in the video. It's literally just dismissed as if like it doesn't exist, and that's the problem that I have.
Where does the press fall into this as the Anointed group? Are they part of the Anointed?
Oh, absolutely. They're a major part of it because one of the reasons that people don't get many of the facts that go against what's believed is that the press doesn't choose to publicize those facts.
Give me an example of something the press might not cover or cover well.
Oh, a few years ago, there was a story about prenatal care among blacks, that black women get less prenatal care than white women. The infant mortality rate is higher among blacks. They immediately assume that one causes the other. Now, one of the things I like to do is go back to the original source and find out what it said. I went back. On the very same page where it said that, the figures showed Mexican Americans get even less prenatal care than blacks, and they have a lower infant mortality rate than whites. So prenatal care and infant mortality rate have nothing to do with each other. If you break it down further, black women who have only a high school education, but who are married, their children have lower infant mortality rates than white women who have a college education, who are unwed mothers. So it's not race, it's not income, it's not education, it's lifestyle. When you live a certain way, there are consequences to that. The media.
See, this is what I'm saying. Media is easy to manipulate statistics. I know this because I'm an engineering student. You can manipulate any statistic any way you want. Well, not in math, because math is one answer. But I'm just saying it's multiple ways to view statistics. That's basically what I'm saying. I'm not saying you can manipulate it, but it's multiple ways to view statistics, a probability. It's multiple ways to view it. But yeah, if you have any more suggestions, comment them down below. I'm gonna end this video right here, and I'll see you on the next one.